and welcome back to the channel. I'm going to break off momentarily from my big project to put together another MinimumRC model. This one is actually one I've built before, but it's got an uprated motor and gearbox. So I'm going to build one and we're going to see how much better it is at flying. So let me bend you down straight away and you can see what I'm up to. What I'm building is the Mark 14 Spitfire. And, or is it Mark 16? Beg pardon, Mark 16 Spitfire. Looks just like that. It's got retracts, it's 4-channel, well 5-channel including the retracts. And we're going to put one together. On the page for the Spitfire, to go down to, you see, click here for instructions and they will load, and they are really very good. And like I've said, with all MinimumRC models, you have to follow these instructions absolutely precisely, because if you don't, you'll run into difficulty. So there you go. First thing, get out those parts. Fuselage frame wooden parts. We don't touch the kit yet. I've got a blue pack as well. So I've got a kit set, all the bits and pieces, and a canopy and spinner. You need a scalpel to open the bag where the scalpel is. You'll need the little screwdriver later on. Scalpel with snap off blades. What I'm going to do, because I've already got a video online showing a step-by-step construction for this, I'm not going to show you a step-by-step construction. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But what I will do, I'll just talk to you a minute. What I will do, I'll link to the build video I've already done of the Spitfire. As I go through this new build, I'll come back to you just to clarify certain parts which I think need clarifying. Okay, any little tips I can give you, or any little problems I've encountered at each stage, I'll come back to you and tell you all about it. Okay guys, so let's just bend you down and you can watch me start. And I'm going to start by popping out the wooden parts, which are laser cut, but you have to find the little tabs just to pop them out. Yeah, if you've never built one of these before, MinimumRC, they're all basically the same actually. The whole model is assembled around a plywood crutch which holds all the radio gear. Just look through the instructions and understand the process of construction. Something to bear in mind is there's a little flange on the back of that cog, and if you're not sure which way it goes, I think I know which way it goes, but I just want to absolutely make sure. Okay, so I'm going to press this flange on. It's a small hole actually. I'm going to see if I can press it on with the little flange at the back towards the motor. It's a particularly tight fit. You've got to be careful here. I'll tell you why, because these wires at the back of the motor are quite delicate, and if you start doing too much flexing, you're going to end up breaking them, and if you break them, then you've had it. So let's see if I can push it on. There you go. So just pushed it on, facing straight down, not pressing on the wires at all, but just the body of the motor all the way down so it can go on no more. So that was exciting, wasn't it? So I'm going to push that through there now. Again, not pushing on the wires until that engages into the big cog. I think that's all the way up. Okay. Right, let's assemble this. I'll tell you what is a good thing to have is a nail file. It's invaluable for just taking off those little pieces of thing that stick out. So look at the picture, double check there's not an orientation. There are some little holes. Using this quite fat pin, I'm just going to open these holes out slightly, because these holes from previous experience are quite tight. Oops, be careful of that wire. I think I might have to unravel it. Use the pin to spread it. It should slot into the grooves on the plastic. The picture shows the motor is not all the way forward, it is back a little bit. So you might want to do the same. Don't push it too far forward, as you'll hit the propeller. The bit the motor slides onto, just file it a little bit flatter that end so as the motor can slide on a lot easier. I've pulled the prop off just to make life easy. I've got this set to the correct place. Don't push the motor all the way to the front. When you're happy with its position, the prop spins freely. Don't leave too big a gap. The spinner gap would be a bit big. Okay, so that's what we got. So the next step is to fit the servos. The servos are absolutely critical where they go, so study it well. You'll notice some of them go upside down, some go the right way up, some are mounted on the bottom facing down, some are mounted underneath facing up. So just really look at the picture and know exactly where they go. If you don't get it right, then the servos won't line up in the slots in the fuselage. Here's a little tip for you. It makes life a lot easier if you magnetize your screwdriver. I'll give you a tip about putting the control horn on. It's incredibly easy to strip the plastic on the servos, so just use hardly any torque on the screwdriver, just nip it ever so slightly and call it a day. Okay, that was worth just very slightly enlarging those holes. I'll put the other three in, then I'll come back to you guys. Just as a precaution, so as you know which is which, just mark next to each servo what they do. So I'm going to write an E next to that one, R next to that one, the middle one's the ailerons, and that is the gear. Just mark them on there. SAVS aero vector system, which is basically helps to stabilize the flight. Well, I've got to read through it now and get it right. I've probably got to program the transmitter and get things working. So, but this mounts on top of the fuselage somewhere, well, not on the outside. It's basically, it works on the aileron and the elevator. And there's some little drop switches here, and they're all off at the moment. And reading through this the other day, or yesterday, it says what they do. One is stabilization assist, which I think keeps it to a 40-degree turn at most, which I don't like that idea at all. And one's active leveling, which is more, keeps it level, but you've still got full range of the controls. And but it tells you this is the four switches here, 1, 2, 3, 4, on and off. Switches 3 and 4 reverse the ailerons and elevator, which is fine. I can do it on the transmitter anyway. So I think 1 and 2 should be on, but we'll work it all out and see exactly what's doing. Yeah, so basically the SAVS stand for SAVS Aero Vector System, which is self-stabilizing flight controller designed for fixed wings models. So the SAVS connects between the receiver and the servos, intervening in the control of the ailerons and elevator to assist in stabilizing the flight, which is great news if you're flying these small models in turbulent conditions. So I shall carry on and connect it all up, and I'll see you back in a minute when I've got it all working. I've worked out which servo just by plugging one servo in to each slot, and just made a note of where each servo goes. I'll draw a picture for you. This will be useful for you, possibly. So the receiver, let's just draw a rectangle, and there's your motor, black little motor takeoff, and we've got an outlet here, a servo outlet there, and then two upright ones there and there. As you look at it then, the aerial's in that corner. As you look at it, we've got this outlet is for the gear servo, that's your rudder, that's your elevator, and that's your aileron. I've also just plugged the motor in because I want to test that as well. But I'm not sure which way round it goes. So let's just plug it all back in and we can give you that information. Right, I've programmed it onto my Radio Master on I've got the DSM 21F protocol. So we've got ailerons. I haven't tried these servos yet. The gear I've got on that switch, and as you see I've got it running extra slow. Now if we turn it over, we've got elevator and rudder. Okay, that's all working nice. I haven't tried the motor yet, but remember, because it's going through a gear, it has to spin the opposite way to what it should spin. It might not be easy to see actually. Just to bring you up to speed, the throttle is now working. Here's my receiver board again. Blue goes on the outside, red goes on the inside. If you get it the other way around, I'm guessing the motor will reverse. So you have to get everything working before you assemble this, because you can't get into it, not without surgery. So basically with the flight controller, it is working. When I move the model to the right, it compensates by trying to give me left aileron. When I move it up and down, it's quite violent on the elevator actually, but it does seem to move it in the right direction. If I jerk it up, the flight controller has to be mounted in a level position. The controller board has got little dip switches on it. I think number 1 has to be off. They all come as off in the factory. Number 1 has to be off, number 2 has to be on, number 3 has to be on, number 4 has to be off. That's according to this here. So I've got active leveling. I'm not sure if I want active leveling or stabilizing assist, but we'll come back to that in a minute. I've got aileron and elevator, which is button 2, which is now on. I've got elevator and normal, which is button 3 or switch 3, which is I've set to on. And the aileron is set onto the reverse, which is off. So when I move the control board up, okay, when I move the control board up, the servo pulls the elevator down. When I move it to the left, the aileron servo is pulling on this, which gives me down aileron on that side, which moves it to the right. Things to note is it has to be the correct way round as illustrated in the mounting instructions, and that is with the dip switches facing up and the servo controls on the back facing, servo inputs on the back facing backwards. So I've got aileron, elevator, rudder, and I've tested with the propeller on and that's working. One thing to note, by the way, if you're using a Radio Master, this is a DSM receiver. I've set it to DSM on here, but you have to make sure that the option for enable maximum throw is enabled. It's a little check button directly under the receiver type you choose. If you don't do that, it doesn't work properly. That doesn't work at all. I've just had to Google that. So there it is. So everything's working correctly. I've tried it with the propeller on. The propeller is spinning the right way. Let's just double check. I haven't got the little knob on the front, but if I ease it on. Okay, turning clockwise, which is what we want. Which is what we want. So there you have it. It's all ready to install. So I'm going to tidy up all this wiring. I'm going to sit this, I'm not sure where. Oh, I just wanted to find out what active leveling means. Active leveling, when the transmitter stick is centered, the aircraft automatically retains a level attitude instead of directly controlling control surfaces. dead tilt angle is capped at 40 degrees, which obviously I don't want. Stabilization assist, it just counteracts turbulence. So stabilization assist is the dip switch is in the correct position, which is off. Okay guys, I'm going to assemble all this, tidy it up, and I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so I've tightened up the cable tie on the cables. In fact, little tip for you: if you can put something heavy, I've just used this peg on here to stop things moving around while you just curl it up, similar to the diagram. I've had to add the controller into the loom, and I think this will be the approximate position. I'm going to glue it to the fuselage sides when I get them in, but I've still got a little bit of movement here. I can move it around slightly, so I think that'll be about correct, because they don't show you that in the instructions. I've also included the motor wires into the cable tie, so it's taken the strain off of the actual motor connector. The other thing I want to do is the battery wires onto the board are vulnerable to bending. So what I like to do is to CA them to the frame. I look at my other one. I've CA'd them to where they come out. Yeah, I see what I've done. You can't see obviously, but I've bent them down because I pulled one off earlier on and soldered it back on. I'm just going to bend them down, bend it straight down and CA it onto, no, I think they're going to be in the way. I'm going to have to strain it slightly, put it around that motor cables, put it back down. Just got to be so careful with these connections. So now I can just CA those two cables onto the, I'm going to CA it and hold it down, and that will take all the strain off of the connections. Because of the continual moving the battery in and out, it can only strain them, so I like to fix them down. And I'm just going to press this into the CA for a few moments. Right, so there we are, that's dried. So now I can tug on those battery cables if I need to, but it's not putting any strain on the connector. So let's just snip off this cable tie, being careful not to cut through any of the wires. That would be a bit of a faux pas. And that's the electronic side of things finished, step 13. Like that. Right, next step. I'll come back to you if I find anything, because I've actually got one of these videos online already, so I'll link to that down below, so as if necessary you can see the exact step by step. But the next step is the fuselage sides, so I'm going to get the glue ready. I'm going to get the fuselage sides prepared as per instructions, and yeah, instructions, and then glue the first fuselage side at step 16 onto the side. When I've done that, I'll come back to you and we can see what it looks like. I brought you back early because I wanted to show you this. I've offered the side up and I thought, well, I don't know, it seems a bit of a funny angle, and when I restudied the picture, I've actually put the rudder and elevator servo on. They're the correct way up, but I should have put the lugs under the frame, not on top, so the holes didn't line up. If I hadn't noticed that, well, everything would have been out of skew and everything anyway. So I'm just going to undo the screws and remount the servos underneath the mount, but with the screws going through from the top. Not that it matters actually now, the screws can go in from the bottom, but the lugs go under, although the servo stays on the top. So I was saying earlier on, really scrutinise the picture, and I've made a few of these and I've made a mistake, so, but it is corrected easily at this stage. The other thing of interest, if you do have the flight controller, I was going to mount it somewhere up there, and I think it's not going to go because of the angle of the fuselage, so I think I might have to tease the wires out a little bit so as it comes further down, because the battery sits on the top here, so it can come lower. So I'm going to alter that. So I just thought I'd show you that. Silly mistake. Schoolboy error. Just putting the stickers on. The front sticker that wraps around past the prop. My advice is to put it on there first and then just flop it over the top, and it should line up. If a sticker doesn't line up quite well enough, I wouldn't recommend you pushing it down hard to start. Put it down gently. If you've got to take it up, again, just to reposition it, it's quite easy to do. Back one's on. The tail wheel I've already prepared. I've done the leg just with a black felt tip pen and then stuck on the wheels. That's ready to go on in a minute into the slot in the back. That's what I lined up. On the bottom sticker, I just lined up the little slot in the back for the tail wheel and then just ran it up, and it ended at perfect position. Oh, another little tip for you. Get a bit of masking tape, slice it up into thin strips like this, just ready to wrap around the fuselage, just to hold things while they set. So we'll let that set, and when that's set, I can glue it on there. In the meanwhile, I can start looking at the wings, cut them out, and I think there might be some carbon rods to glue in them. Let's look at this one and see. Yes, there is. So I could actually prepare the wings as well. That's got it. Yep. So the elevator is now pretty much level. So as I say, I don't put heat on it. You could heat one up, I suppose, but I just put a small drop of CA, and because it's not heated, it will wick down inside the tube. If I'd heated the tube, it would be shrunk, and they can move, but the CA fixes it really solid. I could start looking at the assembly for the retracts. Basically, the left and right undercarriage, they're handed. They're not the same both sides. They're angled, and you've really got to pay a lot of attention. So what the screen shows you is to lay the components out in a particular order, and that's how they're assembled, and I recommend you do that as well. So let's just push that over there and move the blocks a minute, and I'm going to lay out the components. Let's do it on that side, shall we? Landing gear wires next in. Just follow the instructions carefully and you will assemble them. I'm just going to carry on here. Go in there. Goes around that way. That goes around that way. Now I'm just going to see if it's actually, no, it's not actually glued. I'm going to put some more CA in there. I'll run it in actually. Perhaps that's a better way. Just put a blob in there and let it run in. But you've got to make sure that that is flat and parallel to each other. Little update, guys. So I've assembled the landing gear assemblies and glued them in place using the rather clever little spacer to get them in the exact place, which is nice. So I've really got to let that set very much, so I can't touch it now. So I'm going to crack on with something else, and then we'll come back to this and do a little bit more. You can see the size of the servo horn they've got on the screen. And now you see the size of the one I've got. I haven't used the outside holes, but the holes are just a little bit further out than the one I had on originally. And I knew from past experience on my other one that it requires a bigger horn. So that's a bigger horn, but it just works. And just locks into position. So really happy with that, first time. So now all I've got to do is dress up the undercarriage legs, same as this. Although I'm tempted not to because of the drag from the doors, and it makes it for quite a, big lump hanging down there. I'm tempted not to. And I've also left these wheels angled forward into the slipstream a little bit to make it more streamlined. I haven't bent them back into the shadows yet. I may do that now, but really happy with the way that has actually gone in. One other thing I've noticed, they supply a 260 milliamp hour battery, which is longer than the 180 they've got showing on the screen. And the upshot is that these are longer and you can't put the battery in without it hitting the servo arm. So on this one, and it's worked really well, I've cut out the front just so the battery can come further forward. It doesn't hang out, but it just comes far enough forward not to clash with the horn. So you may want to consider doing the same thing, and I'll probably have to do it on this one in a minute. I've put the push rods on the inside hole of the ailerons and also on the inside of the elevator. It wasn't going up far enough. They reckon about 5 mil each way. But otherwise, I'm calling that done. Let's just take the battery out. I'll just show you underneath. I've cut a hole in the front like my other one, and the battery just sits in nicely now. Another thing you can do on the hatches, just take a piece of scrap plastic just to give you a tag, just to make it easier to open and shut. So there we are, we're done.